Christopher from the School of Self-Reliance has been teaching survival education since 1974. More than just an expert, also a deep and critical thinker, and writer of survivalist books that you might actually find useful if your entire world was flipped on its head, including How to Survive Anywhere, a guide for surviving urban, suburban, rural, and wilderness environments. Christopher finds himself constantly in new situations as a continuing mental exercise and challenge to maintain his discipline and his flexibility for adaptation for even the most unexpected of circumstances. And even more than that, he prepares for the future by building a community today. I'm really excited about this conversation. I think you will be too, and I hope you get the chance to visit his website and check out some of his classes if you're in the Los Angeles area. And if you're interested in survival or self-betterment, I definitely recommend checking out his classes, books, and DVDs. Make sure to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.
I got up and I've just been working.
You look like a professor. You look like a very West Coast professor. So first off, how are you doing, by the way?
Good. Just I'm teaching tonight, so as usual, more than I can get done in a day. I've got some writing projects to do. I'm going to go out. You've been getting rain up there, right?
Yeah, thank God, finally getting some rain.
We're supposed to get loads of rain tomorrow, so I got to go out in a while. But I'm doing fine. Just busy as usual.
Excellent. So you want to introduce a bit about the Self-Reliance School and what it is that you're going to be teaching and what you've been teaching?
Sure. Okay. My name is Christopher Nyerges. This is one of the many books I've written, Foraging California. You've seen this book?
Yeah, totally. And school.
So I got started in botany and ethnobotany in my late teens and began teaching through the prompting of a local nonprofit. And I actually met Yo Gibbons in 1975, I think it was. I've been teaching since 1974. I do classes these days several times a week. I teach at the local college. I've written, I don't know, 20-some books now, not all on wild foods, but Guide to Wild Foods was my first book. And I've done 6 of these foraging books and How to Survive Anywhere. So I do a lot of writing. I write for magazines. I write for newspapers. I was editor of Wilderness Way for 7 years. I was editor of American Survival Guide for a while. Mostly people know me through the plant walks. We go out, we take a bowl, we take salad dressing, and we can find our food in nature. And so my whole reason for beginning, we started my wife and I began School of Self-Reliance to make it more formal, because mostly it was just me going out when I get a request. And then I had a job that I was losing, and we decided I'm going to start doing classes more regularly. And we did crafts, and we worked farmers markets, and I started doing more lectures and more classes. And it really arose from my early interest in how people live, how they how we do a lot of the wrong things, you might say, in our society, and we expect good results. In other words, we live in a non-sustainable way. We use more than we need. We think we deserve a lot, we think we deserve everything. But even as a teenager, I always thought, how can this go on? Population increases, there's farmland keeps getting cut back, with development. How can this go on forever? So that my original concern was just out of just looking at the world and thinking, how this is not going to end well. And as an individual, there's so many areas that you could look at. You could be an urban planner. You could do this. You can do that. But I just thought my thing was how to be prepared myself, how to make myself prepared, how to learn about the landscape, how to change my lifestyle, and how to teach others about it. So my thing is to, train mostly the individual on how to be more prepared, how to live a more sustainable life. Not so much emergencies, but that's part of it, but how to deal with things daily. Everyday choices to be a part of the solution. If you're learning about foods that grow like weeds and you can eat them, then suddenly you're not going to use poisons. Suddenly you're thinking about the land and your relation to it in a lot differently. If what were formerly weeds is now food, so you're thinking about it differently. So in the various things that I teach, I try to get people to become more attuned to their local environment and to work with their neighbors and friends to do that also. Another topic I used to lecture about was vanished civilizations. And I've developed theories about what happened to some people, which is really interesting. But you know, I could go in any direction in the future, whatever you want. I'll send you. So when we're done, you're going to get. I'll send you a bunch of photos and
Vanished civilization, just completely forgotten.
Those that are gone. At least 3 civilizations, maybe 4, right here in North America, that you're not taught about in the schools. Way before Columbus, the Cahokians. The largest pyramid north of Mexico City is in Illinois, but the Cahokians appeared around the year 1000, give or take. They lasted for about 150 to 200 years, and then they disappeared. If you look at the culture and everything they built, I believe they were some of the descendants of the Mayans who came up the Gulf of Mexico, and they went up the river and they started a culture. Yeah, Cahokia, correct. That's it. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, that's Cahokia. So
right in here.
History doesn't say where they began, but if you look at the map, you see Yucatan. They came up into the Gulf in about the 10th century. Then they disappeared at about 200 years later. So that's one of the civilizations. You also had the Adena and the trying to think of the name, the Hopewell. Those were 2 mound building cultures, the Adena, Adena, and you have the Hopewells. Those are separate from the Plains people, and they apparently were killed off by the Plains Indians. Those are 2 other civilizations. You also had the Anasazi.
Right.
The Anasazi, I'm not sure where they came from, but they eventually went back down into Mexico. And every one of these has their own story. I mean, we're just glossing over the top. This is just North America. You had the Silk Road civilization in Mongolia. You had the Moche people down in South America. That's on the west coast of South America. There are a lot of civilizations that have come and they're absolutely gone, and we don't really know what happened to them. Yeah, there you go. That's Anasazi. That looks like Pueblo Bonita, I think. This is like such a unique structure. The people were absolutely astounding. The astronomy, the archaeology built into this. Yeah, now you have Hopewell, and I could give you my theories and what I think, where they came from and where they went. But but needless to say, I would do all-day seminars, and we would talk about a couple of these cultures and the similarities to previous cultures. Like, where did the Mayan come from? Most people say they came from the Olmec, but there's a lot of evidence that the Mayan people, the flowering of the culture came right out of India, and the temple building culture in India, which would have been like on boats almost a year journey to get over to Central South America, not South America, Central America. Yeah, Mayan and India. The similarities are just totally profound from India and Mayan culture. Kind of interesting, huh?
Absolutely.
I didn't even know that's online, because this is a very unorthodox version that the Mayans came from India. Like the resemblances, and it's not just 1 or 2 things. The resemblances are like hundreds of resemblances in terms of the clothing, the postures of the people in the inscriptions, and on and on and on and on. I mean, there's like a lot of text. I read textbooks about this. I never saw these pictures, but some of the images are just shockingly similar.
Here's my favorite: is this picture from Egypt and this picture from Ecuador.
Yeah, I've never seen that one either. No,
there's better ones even. I think actually I should look for it. But what's funny is they found this in a place called the Land of Giants above Baños in Ecuador, and there are tons of examples of it. Here's one really great: Ecuador, Mesopotamia. Check out that.
Yeah. Okay. So that's Crespi, the Crespi collection. The traditional archaeologists don't know what to think about Crespi, and they just say it's all fraud.
But well, no, now we know, because I just was in Ecuador about 2 years ago, and in the east in Ecuador, there is a place, this forest called Land of Giants, and Google has laser proven it's there. And then, you know, this is where all the stuff's been coming out that they were trying to hide for a while. But there is tons of it, and it's definitely not fake. I've saw some of it.
So the whole point to me really is that what you're taught in school is just a version of reality, and it may not be the only version or the best version or the most accurate version. And it relates to survival because, to me, you got to know the Boy Scout skills for sure. You should know the Boy Scout skills, but also, you need to know the Boy Scout skills, but you should have the big picture. How'd we get here? Where are we going? Why do you run around doing the things that you do all day? You know, I mean, you know, the life that everybody, all my friends, people that I know, you get a job, you work 8 hours a day, you get a good pension, you get a retirement, and then you watch TV. You know, I mean, that's old school thinking as far as I'm concerned.
It's the tune out. It's the tune out.
Yeah.
Out. So Atlantis and Lemuria, right? Those are the two utopias in Blavatsky and history, and
they weren't really utopias. They were just ancient civilizations that are gone. Well, are you a part of? Well, the Baghdad Battery is a very simple technology.
Right. Yeah.
Anybody can make that. That's not even complicated. But are you a member of any group or study group?
No. I mean, I am a group. We have a group that we're like putting information out, but there's no sort of secret. Is the idea?
Right. There is no secret.
Yeah. I mean, it's the idea of trying to understand things, and you know, people have had things that they didn't understand, and maybe that's a secret. But we want to share that information. We're not trying to withhold information.
Right. You know, Blavatsky, her work is good. I've read Isis Unveiled and the Secret Teachings, and then there's also Harold Percival. That's the main book that I use, Thinking in Destiny.
I've seen you a couple times actually through the universe presenting yourself to me. People from California are sort of the products of survivalists. And so my dad's sort of a hoarder. And you were actually on television being a prepper who was more of not a hoarder, but someone who learned how to survive in a chaotic situation and finding new ways.
I was in a show called Hoarders and Preppers.
No, you were in Doomsday Preppers, right?
Doomsday Prepper, that's right.
Yeah. You were in the Doomsday Prepper show, which was, I felt like the counter. There's a lot of people in that show that are actually just hoarders, but you weren't a hoarder. You're actually an information seeker. And then I noticed when I went to UCSC and visited a friend doing a plant walk, your book actually being used like while we were looking out in my very backyard, and like I was able to see my own neighborhood in ways I hadn't before. Yeah, exactly. The Foraging Nature book. It's being used right there in UCSC.
So you know, I think people should know what's available in their environment and be able to use it. I'm not a hoarder, but that's not to say you don't need stuff. I mean, because there's stuff that you need, but a lot of people that I've run into, they think that, you know, you want 1 million knives and you want 1 million guns. And I'm thinking, you know, the reality is what you really want is to get to know your neighbor. You want to grow things. You want something dynamic. Not hoarding is static, and it gives you a false sense of security. If you have a lot of junk, somebody can steal it from you, or your house can burn down. So what you really want is, I always tell people, you need your stuff, but don't get so hung up on that's all you have is boxes of knives and stuff. You want relationships with other people, and you want to learn skills. You know, when I say skills, growing things, making things, fixing things, even other languages, being able to speak other languages, because we have a diverse population. That's a survival skill.
I was in the Amazon. I noticed there's like people that don't even speak Spanish, and I found that was very frustrating for me. But you have to learn how to communicate. So what would you imagine would be the best way you would start communicating with people that have completely different lack of symbols, you know? Okay,
so I'm not fluent at American Sign, but I have taught Native American Sign Language. So the Native Americans who lived in the plains, they spoke different languages because they had a lot of different origins. They came from different places. They migrated, and they developed the Plains Indian Sign Language. There's American Sign, that deaf people use. So the reality is, if I did this, you know what I meant. If I do that, you know what I meant. If I do this, I mean under. I mean high. And a lot of the symbols developed And I would highly encourage people, just as brain training, if nothing else, to practice. You could go online. There's some very good sign language things. You know, you learn the alphabet and how to communicate with people. You know, the various symbols that they use, and you might be in a situation where you can't talk. You're in an airport, or there's somebody listening, another language won't work, and you want to say, you know, like maybe there's danger, and you want them to come or something, you know. So there are universe, like if I want to eat something, can I eat it? Make you know, you use your face, can I eat it? Or is it going to make me sick? You know, I have a headache or a fever. You could figure it out. People have you know, where can I sleep? You know, people usually can figure that out. And then if you want to communicate, you can. That's one thing I can say. If you want to be frustrated and you're a complainer, you're not going to get along very well. But I find that the deaf people are very, to me, because I interact with them occasionally at one of the farmers markets, they're very refreshing because there's no fluff. There's almost no lying. It's just the communication is very basic, real simple. You fill in the pieces, you know, you fill in the space between the gaps. You know, like, I mean, how are you? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we've had conversations. I'm not saying I get it all, but it's almost a pantomime, and you do have to do some learning because there's certain things that are abstract that the symbols mean what they mean, and but that's what I would encourage people to do. If you're in the Amazon and they don't know sign language, I mean, you can still try. There's certain symbols that are pretty intuitive. It's logical what they mean.
Approach is the Gestalt. People will often say boba is the circular shape and Kiki is the pointed shape.
It depends on the context. Like if you do this, I'm going somewhere, but it might mean water and it might mean a snake. It depends on how you're communicating and what's going on.
That is where then communication becomes our memories of the icon, our, you know, our references to our experiences with something, our love or lack of love for it.
Right.
Well, you were saying earlier something about also, you know, I was thinking it's funny, you don't have a smartphone, you know, you can get by with all kinds of stuff, you know, without that. What are the things though you were saying that you do have or that you do need that do matter?
That's my phone.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's like the Matrix.
Things that I do recommend carrying. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. What are the material objects that one should know how to have, know how to make, know how to use?
Okay, here's the thing. I carry a fire starter, a Bic, and I carry on my keys, I carry this fire starter. So I always have a couple of knives and fire starters with me. To carry a knife with you at all times. You know, have some kind of a knife that comes in handy for everything.
What are some great positive instrumental tool uses for knives?
Everything comes in handy. I carry this all the time, my Leatherman, and I carry a Swiss Army knife. When I taught at one of the colleges, when I started, I said all the hikers should have a knife and a fire starter with them. And the dean of the college called me and he was yelling at me. It was a hiking class, for God's sake. And he said, "What are you guys going to do? Carve your names on trees and burn down the forest?" And he was serious. He was serious. And I realized this is a guy who wears a suit, who never goes outside. I said, "Oh, no, we're carrying the knives because we may want to slice our oranges and share an orange. And we have the fire because sometimes we warm some tea or some soup or broth. And in other words, I had to dumb it down. But
those are real things. Those are the most important things.
I wasn't kidding, and I wasn't playing with him, but I use my knife all the time for opening envelopes. I mean, for everything. This thing I use mostly for hardware on some of the booths, the pop-up booths at the farmers market. They go wrong. I have to pull a little thing out. But the thing is these are versatile tools, and you never know when you need them.
Yeah, the weaponization of tools is the fear of instruments, and it's something.
I tell people when they ask me, "Am I carrying a weapon?" I say, "Get that out of your mind. If this was a weapon, you know, I mean, I'd want something a little bit bigger. I want something like this, maybe. but you're no, you're talking hand-to-hand combat, and then if you're not a skillful martial artist, they'll just take it away from you or kick it out of your hand. So I'm not thinking weapon at all. I'm just thinking like I have my scissors in here, I have my saw in here. There's my little saw for some wood. I use these all the time. The only thing I don't use is the corkscrew because I don't drink. Right. So that's a must. Whether you're in the woods or in the city, you carry a knife, you carry a fire starter. I mean, obviously cell phone, obviously money, right? I don't know why the survival people don't talk about money, because that's a very real part of our daily life. Carry as much money as you can afford to carry. I mean, within reason. Credit and an emergency credit cards wouldn't come in handy, but I carry.
What kind of money do you carry? I mean, if the society falls apart, is paper money always going to be a thing? You want to carry silver rings, like there's been a lot of nomadic societies throughout history that have lived off jewelry,
Right. Well, I mean, I would have to say that at this point, like if I lived in Syria and there's really nothing. I mean, I would be trading food. I would be trading essentials of daily life, assuming I could produce them or grow them, or harvest them or whatever, or services. Because really, it's like if it comes to a Book of Eli world, the money, the abstraction of money is not relevant. I don't feel we're really quite there. So, I mean, I still do electronic money. I do plastic cards. I do checks, but I try to use coinage. In my car, I usually carry, 50. I carry 50-cent pieces. People get all excited when they see 50-cent coins because they don't usually see them. And you spend them. And I spend $2 bills sometimes, even though the $2 bill is just paper. People get excited when they see it and they think they're getting more than they're actually getting. And when I go to the bank, I ask for dollar coins sometimes. Occasionally, they have the big dollars, the old Eisenhower dollars. Now, that's just junk coins. There's no silver in there. If things really got bad after, weeks or months and, things weren't going back to normal, it's a whole different ballgame. I know that.
We have a friend in Venezuela, actually, who's been really helpful. He actually left Venezuela recently, and thank God, because it's been just insane. But some of the stories he had before he got to Chile, some stories you might have heard from like the old country with the grandmother's mattresses filled with money that's worth nothing. And so now they take the money and they make clothes or things that they can sell.
The paper money.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, it's hard. Well, here's the thing. It's hard for one person to realistically say they're planning. They're planning for the end of the world or the end of society, because that's what people do as a group. I mean, I wouldn't know what to do. I mean, I might know better than the average person, but I'm a firm believer of living frugally and supporting your society, supporting the institutions in your society, and making them work well. I mean, you don't want your society to break down. Today, it doesn't look good. The way everybody is at each other and hostile, and then that's what leads to the breakdown of societies and the lack of trust. Money in our society is a function of trust. There's nothing to it. It's trust. There's nothing really backing of the paper to speak of. So the function of money in a society is that I trust the intermediary, the government, to make that paper useful. So I mean, we have a good thing going. It could be lost. You never know, but it's almost you're back to Stone Age and Book of Eli world and Mad Max world if you don't have a functioning government, then, because money is of no value then, just tradable things.
Well, that's probably a good thing actually to talk about. I think it's important to bring up that this isn't just speculation and this stuff is I mean, the story of the barbarians destroying Rome, I think is one of my favorites. Water-filled city, hit the aqueducts a few miles out of town, not a lot of water after that, just mud and completely decimated population. Without water, it was pretty quick.
So I'm in the LA County. And so we have a 330 some mile aqueduct up to Northern California to get the water. And people have tried to sabotage that before. It still flows, but I always tell people down here, Store water. It's the most important thing for survival that you can do. Store water and learn how to collect rainwater. Learn your local sources. Learn how to purify it.
Find your spring maps. Yeah.
This is rainwater that I'm drinking today. I get it off the roof. I strain it, I filter it, and I boil it and make my coffee and soup. I don't store it forever, but it's been raining lately, so buckets are full. I mean, and I was at a lecture last night. They were talking about rainwater for your yard, and I don't like to interfere when I'm at a public speech, but they were saying, but you can't drink it. And I was thinking, what are you talking about? I've been drinking it my whole life. What do you mean you can't drink it? Right? I keep my roof clean. I keep my buckets clean. I strain the rainwater. I test it with the pH. I drink it all the time.
Probably slightly healthier than what you can get out of the tap. I mean,
Well, yeah, it's not all the sediment is not in the tap. None of the chemicals. I mean, nothing is totally pure because we have stuff in the air, but I try to get it as pure as I can. So those are some of the skills that if you do them, see, I don't think of it in terms of I'm going to do such and such if there's an emergency. This is what I do now.
Maybe we should talk a bit about that. Do you want to like kind of expand that concept? What does that mean to you?
Well, okay, number one, that means if people haven't seen the Book of Eli, they don't know what we're talking about. So the Book of Eli is a worst case scenario, I imagine, of 30 years after a nuclear exchange. They don't say that, but that's what I believe the movie's about. And Denzel Washington is this guy who's trying to get from the east to the west. And there really don't appear to be many trees. There's no cities, and there's little pockets of people who are very animalistic, I guess I would say. They fight for the resources. Water is scarce. I would say that's probably happened, aside from the nuclear part, that has probably happened in human history, like with the Anasazi in the Southwest, because you can trace their tracks. Water probably was the primary factor. We know that they had some kind of a civil war, and a lot of them they killed each other, or we think there were at least two groups. So you had some infighting, civil war, and they fled, and water exacerbated their problems. They never had the numbers that you find in LA County, but you never know where human culture as we are now is going to go. I mean, people write science fiction, so we think about that, so we can try to anticipate that, and hopefully that won't happen. But if there was a nuclear exchange, I like to tell people, I don't care how well you tell me you're prepared. Until you're in it, you don't know what you're going to do. I mean, this is true about anybody. On Naked and Afraid, that TV show, some of the experts go on that show and they fail after 3 or 4 days. You don't know what you're going to really, just because you have boxes of knives and you can go to the range and shoot, doesn't mean you could handle the stress of no orderly life, no toilet, no regular water, no regular meals. I mean, this is what gets most people. So that's what the Book of Eli was all about. It could happen with nuclear exchange. It's happened, like if you were on the fringe of Japan when the bombs went off. If you lived, you'd have a terrible life for 10 years or so if you survived, because you have diseases and your whole infrastructure is destroyed. But if another scenario that's probably happened a lot is disease, cholera, plague, and it's a lot of this never got recorded. People in history, there were people who recorded some of it, but there weren't cameras. But there were stories of half of Europe that died off. So if you think about that, that meant there was no law and order. There are a lot of empty houses. You could just go look and hunt and rob houses and find. So it's like it's almost our world today. There's some bad areas, but people who live in a relatively stable society, they probably cannot even imagine how bad that would be. You don't know what to expect, right? If half of the society is suddenly dead, there are so many things that people are not doing that you expect them to do in a normal running society. You don't know what you can depend upon. You don't know who you can depend upon. You don't know if they're alive. You don't know. Like I could go to the store right now today. I could buy some food, fill up my car with gas, drive around, go check the forest for wood to make some. I could do all these normal things. But when the society breaks down, nothing. You can't assume anything. And that's the hard part for people to deal with. That's why people who have been in the military, who are used to chaos, or police are used to chaos, they tend to do a little bit better because they mentally they've been through what that might be like to be in that society.
A lot of people think that the military is a place where you learn about order, and it's true there's order there, but a lot of it's about chaos. Because if you think about where our society is headed right now, we call this a cappuccino economy, where everything is made in different places. Well, if it was disrupted, if you've seen that film also, The Postman, like, it'd be very difficult to reconnect all the pieces. If we lost certain parts, to make a computer, you have to have pieces from Israel, with semiconductors, with parts from the Congo that have been through Utah and have been manufactured in Japan. And if any of those pieces were disconnected, we would stop having them. And we already lost so many things. I mean, do you know anyone who can make a vacuum tube? Very few people can make cathode ray tube televisions. And it wouldn't be hard to imagine a society that completely knew how to program them but didn't know how to make them, or another society knew how to make them but didn't know the programming. And so you have languages that are based on fallen Atlantis. These are the myths anyway of history.
You bring up a good point. Whether Atlantis existed or not, people debate it, but there are ancient art pieces in the world that seems to show people had some kind of technology. So let's say that Atlantis went down. This group of islands went down in a giant earthquake, and there were survivors that fled. Let's say I was able to flee in a boat with one of these phones. So what? If none of the repeaters are down and nobody's really backing it up, this is an interesting artifact. But at the end of the day, if there's a major disaster, I have to learn how to farm, purify my water, start to make my clothes. I'm back to square one. None of it, so people could have fled with bits and pieces of technology, but they still had to be able to provide all of their basics. That's kind of what I teach, and I try to tell people that it's not a joke, that, you should know all these things. If you don't have to, if you don't have to make your clothes, that's great. But it's good to know how to be able to do it if you had to. It's good to know how to make your meals, make fire, know the basics, and support your society. Support your society and for the upliftment of your society, because it's the disorder in society is the chaos is in society. The order has to be within you. That's why they do with the order, their training, their knowledge, their skills. That's the order within them. That's why they get by. Most people look for the order out in society, and when it's lost, they're lost. So you have to have the order within your own brain and within your own skill set.
Like, everyone is trying to look for someone else to put it together, and literally it's just got to be us doing it every day.
Everybody wants a savior. I mean, seriously, that's why cults have gotten really big. People think of their political leaders as gods. Their religious leaders, they want more than they can get. They want Jesus to save them. I mean, I'm not criticizing any religion, but they want something that they can see or they cannot see to help them. You don't see in survival literature, although you do see it. You ever seen this book of mine? This is the first edition. I have a second edition too, How to Survive Anywhere. This is with all my notes. But I have a section in the back called What is Survival? And I talk about such things as, moral survival, economic survival, the pyramid of success from Coach John Wood, and making goals, and how we affect our environment from our thinking. And I go into things that are normally not thought of as human, like we exacerbate drought. We can affect rain or no rain by human behavior. Also, that you hear of the word karma has taken on a popular. So we can't really escape the consequences of our choices. I know we try to. So people think I've got a lot of knives and a lot of guns, I'm set. But they're a terrible person and they treat people bad. It's going to come back and get them. And there's personal karma, there's local karma, there's national karma. So, you want your country to do the right thing. You want your local city leader to do the right thing, because there are consequences to the choices. And that's probably bigger. That's probably more important and more meaningful than all of the survival planning. It's important to have survival planning and have the physical skills, but if you bring bad stuff upon yourself because you're a bad person, no amount of guns and knives and stored food is going to make any difference. I mean, there are whole towns that have been obliterated. There are civilizations that don't exist, and I'm the kind of person that maybe I've been told I'm too judgmental, but I'm not judging anybody. I'm just thinking there's a reason. And the reason is probably choices and their actions that based on their point of view. Like, where are you? Were you born here in Santa Cruz,
Yeah,
California?
yeah. Right about the earthquake time.
So you know that when Europeans came into North America, there were probably 100 million Native Americans. But by the time the first colony got here, maybe 90% of them, maybe 90%, 90 million or more, maybe even 95 million, they died off from disease. They never saw a white man. Those who were left in California, California was populated by Native people. Spain took it over, and had missions up here. It was under the auspices of the Mexican government, and then the U.S. fought a war with them, and it was United States of America, and then there was gold discovered. I think right around the gold rush is when California was overrun with Easterners, probably 5 Easterners to every native living there, and they just overran the state, killed them off, slaughtered them. They had no legal rights. So what I'm getting at is that was a mental state that I can just take what I want because I want it. And you can't do anything about it. People do get away with a lot of bad stuff. There's a lot of horror stories in history, but what goes around comes around, like they say. I'm not trying to draw the dots together, but
but they are there.
but there are consequences to what has been done by the desire to have something easy and free, and there are ways to resolve that, but that's the ultimate survival skill. I mean, when we were on the cover of Mother Earth News, like in '99 or so, a publisher asked us, "Can you write a book about alternative healing?" And we said, we wrote the book. They didn't like it. We ended up writing this book, Extreme Simplicity, about all the things that we do. But on the healing side, we gave many lectures on alternative healing, how to learn the herbs, how to learn the principles that Hippocrates taught thousands of years ago. Use sunlight, use diet, use exercise, use heat treatment. Don't always have surgery and drugs. There's a lot of things that need to go in the sun. It's science-based. But my wife and I gave a talk at a Mensa organization. You know what Mensa is?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
High IQ organization. And we were talking about some of the ways like to prevent and cure diabetes, some of the ways to cure lung problems. I mean, we were going through the whole book, and somebody said, "Aren't you offering false hope?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And pretty much I said, "Well, doesn't the medical profession offer false hope? Everybody's going to die. And we're not saying you're going to live forever. We're just saying you're going to live better and enjoy your life better if you can let your body heal itself rather than get cut up. And what we're really saying is that you should know all of these things. Change your lifestyle. If you're overweight, you eat the wrong foods. If you smoke and you drink all the time, you should change those things so you don't have to be hospitalized, and you don't have to be cut up, and you don't have to have drugs."
Well, now geneticists are calling that predictive medicine, right? It's okay if you're talking about a virus that'll change your code because it's predictive medicine.
That's funny. So I try to expand the concept of survival as much as I can. This is SelfSufficient Home. This is all about how to do all of these things in your home. People who have alternative toilets, who collect rain, who produce their own power. It's kind of a sequel to. So I've written a lot of books. And survival isn't just a guy in the woods in a cabin with a gun holed up for himself. That's certainly one very narrow Rambo definition. But I think that it should be applied to daily life, even if you live in the city. There's a lot of choices that you can make, even if you live in an urban area. I mean, I don't know. I always like to promote my own books, but that's a good book.
Yeah,
and,
for sure.
What I'll do when we're done is I have a book called Searching for the Meaning of Life. It's fictionalized, but it's true. But I've changed the names. I wrote it under a pen name. It's on Kindle. I'll send you a copy of that. It's like 300 pages. You might find it of interest. And then I was a squatter for a year and a half. I wrote a book about my experiences. I'll send that to you.
Yeah, that was basically when I got most interested in you. It was 2009. I was plastic free and squatting, and I learned a lot. It's basically when I found out about you.
I was a squatter for a year and a half. How did you learn about me? Because you were during.
Well, I was in San Diego, and I wanted to find out about water, basically, and that's how it all started. Because I wanted to figure out how I was supposed to get water sources, and you know, that was the first time I'd ever heard about your book. And then later on, when I went to, I was living at UCSD in the radio station on campus for a while, and then I got access to, you know, the spring map, and then I started learning about how that would work. I got more and more interested in that, and less interested in hoarding. You know what I mean? More and more different kind of preparing. The interest in chopsticks over a fork, learning how to do stuff. You know. Also, my parents sent me to a desert survival program for bad kids when I was like 15. And so I got to go to Idaho and walk in the desert and learn how to make fire with sticks, make a bow drill and things like that.
Who taught you how to do fire?
It's called Seuss. So I had to get a willow branch, and I had to get bark and wet it and braid it and make a rope, twist it. I had to get dog bane, I guess was what we used. And then made a bow drill, and then learned how to bust a coal with a group of other kids, and we had to walk dawn till dusk and built character. It was supposed to teach me that was a horrible thing, but all I learned was that was the only real thing at all.
Right. Well, that's good that you did that.
You were talking about how technology, and we were talking how easily it could disappear. Have you seen anything about the wolf kids? The kids have been raised by wolves. Because it's crazy.
I've heard of that. Is that a myth, or is that for real?
Oh, it's real. Yeah. What happens is they'll have kids who in Russia get adopted by dogs, and it's happened over time. And there's, you know, books in the 19th century, particularly when there's a long case of foundlings. The 19th century is the foundling generation years. But these kids raised by wolves, they study them, and they cannot produce grammar. They might be able to think like thirsty, like you were saying, like up, down, these kinds of. But when it comes to these more abstract thoughts, they can't do it. And they've even had kids who you've seen, like they've been abducted by their parents, kept in these shacks, and then they take them from their parents. They study their brains, and they see that because they've been alone or they've been raised by wolves, the same scenario happens without having any interaction from the parent's brain to teach them. It doesn't develop. And so the left brain never grows. And so it's kind of interesting. We could very easily have a thing that just left, and we would go back to being primordial animals.
I agree. I mean, I could see it happening easily. People always say we're in an enlightened age, but being enlightened is a choice. Yeah. And some people choose to be animals in various levels. There's, you know, we have less crime perhaps in the United States, but worldwide there's a lot of crime and animalistic. You know, we are animals. We can choose to just, you know, to devolve back into just an animal, and which is the antithesis of civilization. I mean, it would be not a great place to live.
It quickly makes me want to ask you, how do you feel about the like mycelium and homeostasis cathedral of mushrooms, and they're kind of the eukaryote of, like, because they're kind of the opposite of animals, because they don't have a hierarchy of the political body, that everything's kind of mixed together, you know, and that isn't that kind of what the internet is doing to humanity,
making us like mushrooms?
Well, what do you think? Does that make sense to you? So if we look at humanity as a bunch of different, you know, kind of like cells that have become an organism or a superorganism, there is a brain to this eukaryote, to this mammalian, this animal style thing. We have a hierarchy. Mushrooms instead mix it all together. They're like animals, but you have a lung cell and a stomach cell and a brain cell everywhere, all scattered together internodally. But there's no, you know, Washington, D.C. of the mushroom. It's all spread out. Saying, yeah.
So I would say that what you're describing in terms of social behavior is like the beehive. The beehive works that way. And there's a good movie you should see, THX 1131, I think. THX 1138.
38. Remember? Yep.
I think that was George Lucas's college film that he originally made. But it's sort of depicting what would happen to us, what is happening to us. So, you know, there's a lot of good stuff with the computer and the internet. but it's all, but just like these things, people are walking around doing this all the time. See them on the street doing all this crap. They're not looking around, and we've gotten too addicted to using the cell phone and using the computer. And Google I teach a writing class, and I tell them, how do you do research? And they say Google and Wikipedia. I say, no, that's not research. Eliminate Google and Wikipedia. That's a lazy mind. Anybody can. It used to be when you bought an encyclopedia, people had to. There were editors who made sure all the facts were more or less correct. Now anybody can post anything on Wikipedia. So yeah, we've dumbed ourselves down by choice because we're lazy, and that part is not a good thing. Here's the thing that I went to a school when I was in my late teens and early 20s. They did read Madame Blavatsky, Harold Percival, and there was a big emphasis on, it was like a private school. I was really kind of a student and a teacher, but and they're not really active anymore. But the people are there. If you ever come down, I'll introduce you. But their whole thing was, your answers are inside you. We're on the wrong path of thinking my answer's out there with Mr. Google or some God out there that's going to tell me the way. Your answers are all within. That's the whole point of people. All the prophets in history tried to tell you, like, look within. That's what they meant. Look within. Your answers are all within you. If you can be quiet, you quiet down. You know, there are ways to find those inner answers, but it's not through the computer, and it's not through your smartphone. It's not through Google. It's that you meditate, you do yoga, you think, you do real research, you actually develop relationships, you do the hard work. You don't take drugs, you don't get high.
Right. Shared lens. It has to be consciousness on multiple levels that have verified each other. Theos.
And here's the ironic thing. When you do that hard work in a different way, you find that in fact we are all alike. But it's a different all of alike. It's like, it's like that you're really free. You're spiritually free, but you're not a bee in a hive. That's the counterfeit all alike. You really are. We really are all the same spiritual essence, but it's from within, not from external all alike, if that makes any sense.
We're looking at this humanity that's becoming a bigger thing. It's either it collapses and we're going to need to learn how to be individuals again, or it's going to become so singularized that you either have a beehive with a queen or some sort of a surveillant mushroom where we're all kind of interact. We're kind of in it together. And yeah. It's either one or the other, or or nothing.
I think, unfortunately, in terms of the practicality, all of the good people who should be running for office don't want to run for office because they get dragged to the dirt. I mean, you do need leaders in society. You do need people to give examples. I try to play my role as a teacher. I teach people how to write, how to think. I teach them skills. I write books. I feel I could do a lot more, but I'm not gonna. I've been tempted to go into politics, but I think that just takes it out of you. That's not really my path. I don't believe.
But it does take, like you said, each person on their individual level to do it. I really appreciate that you did this.
You can always tell people they can reach me through my website. For the classes and the books that I do. All my books, they're the cheapest that way. I sell them myself. I have a store. You could do links if you want.
This has been great. Christopher from the School of Self-Reliance. We're going to do this again soon. Thank you so much for being here.
All right. Thank you, man. We'll talk soon.
Peace.
All right.
I definitely recommend checking out his classes, books, and DVDs. Make sure to like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.